So, for this whole year, once a month, we talk about the 12, whatever the 12th power is of the month. Now, some of you may not have heard of the 12 powers, but 12 powers are sort of like the Swiss Army knife of spiritual tools. Now, that's what's great about a Swiss Army knife, right? Because it's got all these different options on it, but they're all part of the same thing, right? And so these spiritual tools, the 12 powers, are not separate or different from the energy of God or spirit, but it just helps us focus. Because sometimes you need a screwdriver, and sometimes you need a little blade, and sometimes you need different stuff, right? So it just helps us use our energies in a different way. So we're going to do something a little different. So we've done one a month, but so the power for November is release. And that was the day that we had the ice storm and nobody came to church. Not judging, just saying nobody came to church. Which everybody was making good choices and taking care of themselves. So that's good. So I didn't get to give that talk. And then the power for December is life. And because we're busy doing Christmassy stuff in December, sometimes that's the power that gets sort of like the afterthought power, because it's in December and everybody's thinking about Christmas. So I'm going to do a mashup and do them today. So we'll get life a little bit ahead and release a little bit at the end, but that's okay. So that's what we're doing. So you've heard a lot of metaphors about release and why we need to let go, and like the closet that's so full we can't get anything else into it, right? We got to take stuff out before we can put new stuff in. Or like the Dead Sea, where we got so much salinity in there nothing can live, right? Because there's no outflow. Or, you know, that thing that is growing in the back of your refrigerator, or maybe has at some point lived in the back of your refrigerator. So like there's all these great metaphors about that. But making room is an inside job. Right? We have all these great metaphors about outside stuff, about how we got to get rid of it, but it's an inside job. And I found this quote, and it's from Steve Marabai, and he said, "When you hate something, you chain yourself to it." So maybe not the most effective way to deal with things. So one of the great things that we can let go of or release is assumptions. Because when we assume we know something, then we can't actually hear the truth. When we think that we know what someone's going to say, or we think we know how they're reacting or where they're coming from. Have you ever had that conversation where you're like trying to explain something that's important, and all the person that you're talking to can hear is what they think you're saying instead of what you're actually saying? Or maybe the other way around. Maybe you've done it too. Maybe, maybe not. Y'all are pretty smart. So that's something that we get ourselves caught up in when we, and that's sort of also like, when we are in that place of needing to be a place of knowing, or the place of authority, or you know, sort of like an unhealthy ego place, then we can't make room for people to make. And so we have to know how things are, right? And then we get stuck in our rigid knowing, and there's no room for new knowing, and there's no room for new understanding, and there's no room to hear what someone's actually really trying to explain to us or trying to tell us. So when we make those assumptions, we're standing in we have to be right place, we can't know the truth. So that's another aspect of things for us to think about and to let go. We can release that, because then we make room. And making room is great because it's a normal part of the cycle, right? We have That's what actually is kind of, so another reason why I went ahead and did release and life together is because all the 12 powers have a counter, they go together, right? I mean, so here's the thing, all of the powers, the 12 powers can work with all the other powers, right? It's a system that they all need each other, because they're not really separate, but they're different aspects of the same thing. But some of them work even more in sync with each other than others, like release and life. We're going to show you more about how that's a polarity or a system that works together. But when we think about, like, the autumn leaves, right? The trees let go of the leaves so they actually can live. But they need the leaves in the summertime so that they can live. It's an interesting thing, right? They need the leaves so they can get the nutrients that they need, but in the wintertime, the leaves would cause them to die. They'd get too much exposure. So it's an interesting little, oh, well, this is fun. My battery's almost going to die on my tablet, so we'll see if we make it all the way through. How fun is that? I released that. So here's another thing. Linda Martella-Whitsitt writes The Divine Audacity, which I think is the best book about the 12 powers that's currently out. She says, releasing only human consciousness is releasing our sense of limitation. When we release our belief that I am only human, we uncover our divine identity that has been intact all along. We do not have to acquire our divine identity. We need only to release a limited sense of self, our finite self, to reveal the infinite self. That's some pretty deep stuff. The general, with all of the spiritual truths that we teach in Unity, with all the 12 powers, and what Linda is saying here is that the best version of ourselves, our divine identity, is there all along. We don't have to go find it. We have to just let go of the shell or the clothing that we've put on over it. We have to let go of the stuff that makes us show up in ways that are less than our divine identity. The divine is in here. When we say I'm only human, we're limiting ourselves. And I found this great quote on the internet this morning. It showed up in my Facebook feed. I love when that happens. And it's from Ebony Davis, and she says, the tools you created to survive won't serve you when it's time to thrive. The tools you created to survive won't serve you when it's time to thrive. And so that there might have been a time in your life when you needed to create a certain piece of armor to survive, say middle school, or a bad relationship, or that really grouchy teacher in college, whatever it was. You may have needed that to survive, to make it through. But that sense of whatever it is that you need, that sense of shirking away, or whatever it is that you did, that's going to get in the way of you being your best self, to really thriving. So you have to break it out, right? So that's what release is all about. We know nature shows us all these reasons and all these that the cycle of release is an important part, and yet we just cling so much, right? So now I'm going to tell you about why life works with that, because life is the other side of release. It's a circle. So it worked out good that we had that ice storm and nobody came to church that day, because now I get to do them together, which I hadn't thought about doing before. So, that's what resistance gets you nowhere. Resistance is futile. Yes, I have a few Trekkies in the audience. Life is eternal. and indestructible. Linda Martelowitz, it says in the chapter on life, the opposite of life is not death. The opposite of life is stagnation. The currency of life is divine ideas, the limitless possibilities that we either quash or set in motion. God doesn't give life in the way that you and I give each other presents. God is life, and you give life to your dreams and intentions. Remind yourself, I give life to my dreams. The dreams I give life to live. So, have you ever thought it? The opposite of life is not death. The opposite of life is stagnation, which is sort of what I was talking about, why we have to release, right? Because when we don't release, we have stagnation, like the thing growing in the back of our fridge, right? Well, see, life still comes back, right? But not in the way we like. It comes out in unhealthy ways, right? When we don't take care of things. So, life can be the power of actually bringing forth new beings, new people, but there is no end to energy, right? Energy is a constant. And so life is in that energy that doesn't ever go away and doesn't ever start from something. It is always available and there. And so to think that the only way to bring forth life is to bring forth babies is sort of a limited way to think of bringing forth or bring the power of life. Because, like she says, I give life to my dreams. I give life to my passion. I give that spark of vitality. Vitality is another word we use to describe the power of life, to all sorts of things and energies I might have going on in my world. I give life to my dreams. Well, what are those dreams? Those dreams are divine ideas which are the things that are floating around ready for us to grab onto, the ideas of the divine, and then we make them happen. The other thing that Linda says, I really like this book, can you tell? Wholeness is our true nature, our essence. Wholeness means nothing essential is missing. Nothing essential is missing. And sometimes we get caught up in what this physical suit is doing as the expression of wholeness, but they're not necessarily really the same thing. The physical body is doing one thing, and taking care of it is important. But you think about someone who has a vital and alive life going on in their mind, whose body is not able to keep up. Like Stephen Hawking. You wouldn't say, well, he's not vitally alive, right? Well, now that he's passed on, but you wouldn't have said when he was alive, he was doing and thinking and changing our world, the way we understood our world, all the way to the end. Even though his body could barely do anything without help. That's amazing. And so I bring that up because it's to remind us that he had a whole and vital life. And it wasn't about the physical body. I think too often we get caught up in that, like I said, that only human idea, or I'm only my body idea, or my physical well-being. Now, obviously, physical well-being does help us go out and do more stuff. Sure. When it's not getting in our way, that's helpful. But it's not the only thing. Wholeness is a mind and heart job, not a... So, how do we claim and express our vitality? Well, I think that sometimes we get stuck in saying, well, when I get to a certain weight or when I get to a certain ability, then I will be alive. I'll be able to do this thing. I'll be, tall enough to ride the ride. Remember when you had to be tall enough to ride the roller coaster? Well, we sort of make those same kind of limits as grown-ups too, right? When I reach this certain thing, then I will be da-da-da-da-da. Well, what if you decided that you were good enough, whole enough, smart enough, whatever, right now? So that's releasing, right? Releasing any limits that we put on ourselves and claiming that aliveness, that life within. And what, of course, happens is when we claim that, we find the changes happening in our physical body. Because we've let go of the limit. We let go of we have to be a certain thing to be able to do a certain thing. We put so many limits. And so if you wanted to have one picture, we talked about all these different things about releasing. If we want to have one picture that I think is my favorite today, and that is of the trapeze artist. The trapeze artist cannot hold on to the trapeze that they start on to be able to do the work they've come here to do. They have to let go, right? They have to let go at the right time so that they can grab on to the next one that's coming for them. And then they have to let go of that one and go to the next thing. And not only do they have to do that, they have to trust their practice, they have to trust their training, they have to trust the people that they work with, that what they need is going to be there. And how is that any different than us on our spiritual journey, right? This trapeze was very helpful to get us this far, but if we hold on any longer, it's actually going to take us backwards, right? Well, that's not very helpful if that's not where we're trying to go. We have to let go and grab onto the next one. And there's that scary point where you're like, I don't know what's going to happen. But that's where the really good stuff happens, because when we grab onto the next thing, then there's that, wow, yeah, right? If you ever watch a trapeze artist, you're like, yeah, when they make it. And that's that life, that breath of life that we put into things, right? And so we grab onto that and we trust that God, spirit, universe, whatever you want to call it, is in that, and that the next one's going to be there, right where you need it to be. We trust that life in us is going to bring forth whatever we need, whatever trapeze we need to grab to be able to do the next thing. And then we have to know, okay, well, this was helpful, just like what she said, the tools we created to survive. Just because this was a good one for us to grab onto doesn't mean that it won't be time to let go of that one and grab onto a different one. Now, trapeze artist goes back and forth between the same ones, but we'll just pretend that it's new ones, right? Or like monkey bars, where you keep going across, yeah. But, so it's so funny. Like I said, when people a lot of times in Unity, they do the 12 powers and they're really fired up about them, and they get like 3/4 of the way through, and then sometimes they sort of fizzle out their excitement. And this is what's so funny, is so that release and life are at the end, and so a lot of times they sort of get forgotten or left over, and that's just how it happens sometimes. Is we're busy, we get whatever, and yet without them there's no room for any of the other powers to do their work. We have to let go to make room for faith to grow something, for imagination to see what we have to see, for wisdom to know what path we want to take. There has to be room, right? And so we have to let go. We have to grab forth whatever is ours to grow and build in life. And yeah, I'm really glad that we had that ice storm and I got to put these together, because that's good stuff. So, go out there and keep swinging across your trapezes.